Okay, let's just dive right in. I want you to picture something.
Okay.
It's 2 in the morning. Maybe it's a Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, it doesn't matter. The whole house is dark, it's quiet, everyone's asleep. But you're sitting there, and the only light is that harsh blue glow from your monitors.
The spreadsheet glow. I know it.
The
Well,
spreadsheet glow, and you're staring at this Excel file that is so wide and so long that the scroll bar is just this tiny little pixel on the side of the screen. The cells are starting to blur together. You've run the same VLOOKUP, I don't know, 100 times, and you're just praying. Just praying it doesn't give you that horrible #REF error again.
right.
And then your phone buzzes. It's a text from the warehouse manager, and it's the one you've been dreading. An unexpected stock out on a key product.
Mm.
And, you just know it's going to completely crater your quarterly numbers.
Wow. Yeah, that's a painful picture. And the scary thing is, for so many people in operations and logistics, supply chain, that's not a nightmare scenario.
No.
That's just Tuesday. That's just the job.
It is. It's the hidden cost of just business as usual. We have this idea, this sort of hustle culture mentality, that if we just grind harder, drink more coffee, stay up later, we can sort of brute force the supply chain into working.
We can tame it with sheer willpower.
Exactly. But today, in this deep dive, we're going to look at why that approach isn't just failing. It's costing businesses billions. And I really mean billions with a B.
The numbers are, they're genuinely staggering when you dig into the data. We're looking at sources today, one of them citing the IHL group that estimates the global cost of what they call inventory distortion.
What does that mean, inventory distortion?
It's basically two sides of the same coin. It's stockouts, which is when you don't have enough of something people want to buy, and overstock, which is when you have way too much of something nobody wants.
We got it. The two big sins of inventory.
Exactly. And the cost for those two things, globally, is estimated at $1.7 trillion annually.
Okay, wait, 1.7
Yeah.
trillion.
1.77 trillion. It's one of those numbers that doesn't really feel real.
It doesn't. It sounds completely made up. That's what the entire GDP of Canada or Australia just gone. Vanished into thin air because of bad spreadsheets.
It is abstract at that scale, for sure. But when you bring it down to a more human level, it hits just as hard. The sources say the average retailer loses about 10% of its annual revenue just to stock out.
10%. So if you're a $10 million business, that's $1 million just walking out the door because a customer came in, couldn't find what they wanted, and left.
And probably went to your competitor who did have it.
Yeah.
And the really wild part is, despite that massive cost, nearly half of small to mid-sized businesses, the number is 48%, are still managing their inventory manually.
Manually. You mean with the spreadsheet of doom I just described?
With that exact spreadsheet of doom. Hand-keying purchase orders. Relying on someone's gut feeling about what usually sells well in the fall, hoping the formulas all link up correctly. It's precarious.
So, okay, this is usually the point in the conversation where technology swoops in to save the day, right? We start hearing the buzzwords, AI, machine learning, these magical black box algorithms that are supposed to fix everything.
Oh, absolutely. The promise of tech is incredibly seductive here, and it sounds amazing. You hear about these platforms that can analyze, 16 terabytes of historical sales data and spit out a perfect demand prediction in under 500 milliseconds.
That sounds like the dream.
It is the dream. It sounds as the end of the 2 a.m. spreadsheet session forever. It's proactive alerts that tell you about 73% of potential inventory problems before they happen. It's a silver bullet.
And on this show, there's always a but.
Yeah.
There's a catch, isn't there? A gotcha.
There is always a gotcha. The reality of actually implementing that kind of enterprise-level software is, to put it mildly, it's brutal.
How brutal.
The average implementation time is 8.7 months, almost a full business year. And the real killer is that 42% of that time, nearly half, is just spent trying to get your data into the new system, cleaning it, integrating it, making it talk to your other systems.
So you're looking at almost a year of chaos and consultants and huge fees before you even get to press the on switch.
And that's if it even works as advertised at the end.
So if the spreadsheet is killing us slowly and the AI robot overlords are taking a year to even show up, what's the actual practical solution for a business today? That's really the core question we're tackling.
It is. And the central thesis of our deep dive, based on these sources, is what if the answer isn't a new expensive piece of software? What if the answer is the right people?
And that's where this company comes in. Today we're going deep on a company called VA Connect. And just for clarity, that's pronounced VA Connect.
Right, VA Connect.
They're a South African-managed virtual assistant agency. Now, before you, the listener, roll your eyes and think, oh, outsourcing, here we go. I've been down this road. I tried Upwork. It was a mess. Just hang on. Because this is not about hiring some random freelancer on a gig platform.
No, it's a fundamentally different model. We're going to explore why that traditional outsourcing approach often crawls down when you give it complex tasks like supply chain planning. We'll look at why South Africa, of all places, is emerging as this sort of Goldilocks zone for talent.
And what a managed agency model actually means and how it's different from the Wild West of the gig economy.
Exactly. And while our focus starts with the supply chain crisis because, well, it's so chaotic out there, the conversation goes broader. We're looking at marketing, sales, executive support. Really, it's about how you build an operational team that lets you, the business owner or director, actually sleep at night.
It's about getting out of the weeds, moving from constantly fighting fires to actually thinking strategically.
It's building a machine that runs without you having to be there to personally turn every single crank.
Okay, I'm sold. Let's start by unpacking the crisis itself. Section 1 of our roadmap, the anatomy of a supply chain crisis. Why does it feel like everything, everywhere, is on fire all the time?
I think the sources describe it as a perfect storm. It's this collision of wildly unpredictable human behavior with fundamentally outdated data systems.
And there was a great case study in the source material that just perfectly illustrates this. It involved a mid-sized electronics retailer and, of course, TikTok.
Ah, yes, the chaos agent of modern commerce.
Right. So what happened?
Okay, so picture this retailer. Out of nowhere, there's this massive, sudden surge in demand for one specific kind of niche gaming accessory. A headset or a controller, something like that.
And why?
No logical reason, not a price drop, not a holiday. It was a viral trend on TikTok. Some influencer featured it, and boom, overnight, everyone wants one.
But the retailer's system, it didn't see that coming.
Their system couldn't possibly see it. They were relying on historical averages. Their spreadsheet looked at sales from the same month last year and the year before that and said, demand is flat. In fact, sales were down 2% last year, so let's be conservative with our order.
But the TikTok algorithm doesn't give a damn about last year's sales figures.
Not in the slightest. And because historical data always lags, it only tells you what has happened, not what is happening. By the time their system even flagged that something was weird, they had already lost 3 full weeks of sales. They sold out instantly.
And in e-commerce, 3 weeks is an eternity.
It's a lifetime. Meanwhile, a competitor, and this is the key part, a competitor cleaned up. They captured basically the entire market surge.
So how did the competitor do it? Did they have some secret, super expensive AI forecasting tool?
No, that's what's so interesting. They had a human supply planning team. They had actual people whose job included monitoring social media signals and then manually adjusting the forecasts in real time.
So a person saw the trend, understood the context,
and had the authority to override the system and say, forget what the algorithm says, get on the phone to the supplier and order 10,000 more of these now.
So it was a person who beat the machine. Eyes on the screen, not just numbers in a cell.
Exactly. And this story really highlights the 4 main categories of failure that our sources lay out. The first one is a classic: data quality, or more accurately, the lack of it. They call it the silo problem.
Right, this is one everyone knows. Marketing has their spreadsheet, sales has their CRM data, and operations is working off a printout from 2 weeks ago.
It's exactly that, and they don't talk to each other. So marketing launches a huge promo, sales starts forecasting a spike, but operations, working off that old data, has no idea. Their forecast is garbage before they even start.
And we're back to that stat that almost 75% of retailers are still using simple spreadsheets. It's just not built for this complexity.
It buckles. It just completely buckles. Which leads to the second failure point: rapid demand shifts.
That's the TikTok example.
That's TikTok. It's also a geopolitical event shutting down a shipping lane. It's a hurricane hitting a port. It's, well, a global pandemic. Traditional models are just too slow. You can't wait for the monthly planning meeting to react to something that happened at 8 a.m. this morning.
And then my personal favorite, supplier variability. This one drives me crazy. Because you can have the most perfect AI-driven demand forecast in the world. But if the container ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal,
your forecast is worthless. It's completely invalid. You cannot predict a storm at the port of Shanghai with an Excel formula. It's impossible. You need actual communication. You need someone who can pick up the phone or send an email and ask the freight forwarder, hey, what's the real situation on the ground? Is our container actually on that ship or not?
And a final one, cross-department misalignment.
Which is the result of all the others. It's the marketing ran a bow sale and didn't tell anyone scenario, a total classic. So
Yeah.
operations didn't order enough stock, sales is promising delivery dates the warehouse can never meet, and now every single customer is angry.
And what's interesting is that none of those are really technology problems, are they? They're coordination problems. They're communication problems.
They are, which leads us right to this idea of the human gap. The argument here is that supply chain management at its core isn't just data entry. It's not just numbers. It requires judgment. It requires the ability to read between the lines of a supplier's email when they say there's a slight delay.
Right. Does slight delay mean 2 days or 2 weeks?
And that nuance, that very human ability to read the room or read the tone of an email, that is precisely where a lot of the traditional outsourcing models fall completely flat.
Okay, let's dig into that, because I think you're right. When people hear outsourcing, a very specific image comes to mind. It's a huge call center, maybe in the Philippines, maybe in India. And the reputation is it's cheap, it gets the job done, but it can be very rigid.
And let's be clear, those hubs are phenomenal for certain kinds of tasks. If you need high volume, highly repetitive work done, basic data entry, tagging images for an AI, reading from a very standard customer support script, that model is optimized for it. It's efficient. You can get that for, say, $8 to $12 an hour.
But planning a supply chain isn't a repetitive task. It's not copy the data from cell A and paste it into cell B. It's constant problem solving. It's chaos management.
It's the opposite of repetitive. It's highly strategic and requires proactive thinking. And this is where what the sources call the data entry mindset really breaks down. When you hire someone from a traditional BPO, that's business process outsourcing hub, they are often trained to follow a process manual to the letter. Don't deviate.
But the supply chain is nothing but deviation.
It's always off script. So when a problem comes up that isn't in the manual, the process is often just to escalate it, flag it, and send it back to you.
And you, the manager, become the bottleneck again.
Exactly. There's a really telling anecdote in the sources about a London-based e-commerce director. It just crystallized this whole issue for me.
What happened with him?
So he had a team based in Manila, and on paper, they were great. They were technically proficient. They could update all the spreadsheets with perfect accuracy, 100% on data entry.
Okay, sounds good so far.
Anytime a supplier sent an email that required even a little bit of negotiation or nuance, let's say a production delay or a raw material surcharge, the team just couldn't handle it. They didn't have the context or the confidence to push back.
So they would just forward the email to him?
Every single time. He said he became a full-time editor. Every single reply to a supplier needed 3 rounds of edits from him because the tone was wrong or they missed the subtle implication of what the supplier was saying. He was saving money on hourly wages, but he was spending all of his own valuable time just fixing basic communication.
That's the communication friction. It's not just about whether someone speaks English. It's about understanding business nuance.
It's a concept called linguistic distance, and it's not about vocabulary or grammar. It's about cultural context. It's about understanding that when a British manager says, I'm a wee bit concerned about this timeline, what they actually mean is, this is a 5-alarm fire and you need to fix it right now.
Right. If you take that literally, you think, oh, he's just a little worried, we'll get to it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And by then, you've missed the shipping deadline.
And then you layer the time zone trap on top of that. This is just brutal, simple math. If you're in London, a 9 a.m. call with your team in Mumbai is, what, mid-afternoon for them? That's workable.
Sure.
But if you're in California, that same 9 a.m. call for you is 1 in the morning for your team in Manila.
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't work.
So you either have these huge gaps in the day where no decisions can be made because half the team's asleep, or you're forcing people to work these awful graveyard shifts.
Which is terrible for morale, for accuracy, for everything. And that leads directly to the next hidden cost, the attrition tax.
Meaning people quit.
Constantly. In those high-volume, often low-margin BPO environments, turnover is incredibly high. So you spend 3 months training someone on all the little quirks of your business, which suppliers are always late, which CUs have seasonal spikes, and 6 months later, they leave for a 50-cent an hour raise at the call center down the street.
And all that institutional knowledge just walks out the door with them. You're starting from scratch. Again.
Over and over. It's this hidden tax on your time and your productivity. You think you're saving money on the hourly rate, but you're paying for it 10 times over in retraining and mistakes.
So, okay, that paints a pretty bleak picture of the traditional model for these kinds of complex roles.
Hmm.
This brings us to the alternative that the sources are really focused on, and that's the rise of South Africa as this new hub. Why there? What's going on in South Africa?
It's a really fascinating story. The South African BPO market is, to put it simply, exploding. The numbers are pretty stark. It went from about $1.65 billion in 2023, and it's projected to hit $3.15 billion by 2030.
Wow, so it's basically doubling in size in just a few years.
It is. That's a compound annual growth rate of around 10%, which is massive. And you're seeing huge global companies making the move. Barclays Bank, for example, they reported saving £2.5 million annually just by moving some of their operations to Cape Town.
But the argument here isn't just that it's cheaper. The core idea is that it's better. It's about alignment.
Exactly. Cost is a factor, of course, it always is. But the real magic ingredient is this cultural and linguistic alignment.
Let's talk about that because lots of countries have high English proficiency. What makes South Africa different in this context?
English is not just a second language there. For many in the business world, it's a first language, deeply woven into the cultural fabric. They consistently rank in the top 10 globally for English proficiency. But it's more than that. The business culture itself is very closely aligned with Western norms, the UK, Europe, the US. It's the style of communication, the understanding of professional urgency, even the sense of humor.
So let's go back to that example of the terse email from a stressed manager.
Right. A virtual assistant, a VA from South Africa, is much more likely to correctly interpret the subtext of that email. They understand that a short, snappy message that says, "We need to discuss options ASAP," doesn't mean, "Let's find some time on the calendar for next Tuesday."
It means drop everything. I need a solution I can show my boss in the next 2 hours.
Precisely. That cultural fluency, that ability to read between the lines, you can't really teach that in a training manual. It's a massive advantage for these kinds of high-stakes, high-pressure roles.
And then there's the geography of it all, the time zone. The sources call it the Goldilocks zone.
It really is. It's just right. South Africa's on GMT +2. So for the UK and most of Europe, that's just a 1 or 2 hour time difference, depending on daylight saving. You are essentially working the exact same business day.
So no more waiting overnight for an answer to a simple question. If you have an emergency at 3 p.m. in London,
Your team in Cape Town is there, online, and ready to help you solve it at 4 or 5 p.m. their time. Morning supplier calls, afternoon strategy meetings, end-of-day reports. It all just works seamlessly.
what about for U.S. companies? That's a bigger jump.
It is, but it creates a really interesting advantage. It effectively extends your operational day. Your South African team can start their day handling all the coordination with your suppliers in Europe and Asia while the U.S. is still asleep.
Oh, that's smart.
Then, as they're finishing up their day, the U.S. East Coast is just coming online, so they can do a clean handoff. It creates this follow-the-sun model that gives you almost 16 hours of continuous operational coverage, but without forcing anyone to work a brutal graveyard shift.
That sounds way more sustainable, which I guess leads to the other point the sources made about the career mindset there.
Yes, this is a big differentiator. In some of the more saturated, high-turnover BPO hubs, the work can be seen as a temporary gig. People are always looking for the next thing. The report suggests that in South Africa, particularly in roles related to finance, operations, and administration, professionals often view this as a long-term career path.
So you're getting someone who wants to grow with your company, not just punch a clock.
You're getting someone who's invested, they want to learn your business, they want to take on more responsibility, they're not looking to jump ship for a tiny raise next month.
Okay, so this brings us right to the company at the center of this deep dive, VA Connect. Again, that's VA Connect. Let's talk about them specifically.
Right. They had a pretty long track record, actually. They were founded way back in 2008, but under a different name, Limetree Consulting. They rebranded to VA Connect in 2014.
And the founder, Karen Wessels, the sources describe her as a captain, someone obsessed with systems and processes.
Systems and processes that work. That seems to be the company mantra. And they've scaled significantly. They're now over 25 dedicated VAs and position themselves as Africa's largest managed virtual assistant agency.
I want to pause on that word, managed. I think this is the most important distinction we need to make. How is a managed agency different from me just going on a site like Upwork or Fiverr and hiring a freelancer myself?
It's the difference between buying ingredients and getting a meal delivered. Upwork is a marketplace. It gives you access to the ingredients, but you're the chef. You have to write the job post. You have to sift through dozens, maybe hundreds of proposals. You have to conduct the interviews.
And then if the person you hire disappears?
Which happens. You're completely on your own. Tough luck. You start the whole process over from scratch. If the quality of their work starts to slip, it's your problem to manage, your awkward conversation to have. VA Connect as a managed agency is a partnership. You're not just hiring a person, you're engaging with a whole organization.
So what does that organization do for you? What's behind the curtain?
Well, the first thing is pre-screen talent. They do all that vetting for you. And for a specialized role like supply chain, that's huge. How do you, as a general business owner, effectively test someone's forecasting skills? They have processes for that. But for me, the biggest benefit is backup coverage.
Ah, so if my main VA gets the flu or goes on vacation, I'm not just stuck.
You're not stuck. The agency has your processes documented. They have another trained professional who can step in immediately and keep the work flowing. You don't lose that critical capacity. It's a huge safety net.
What else?
Escalation support. If there's an issue, a misunderstanding, a performance problem, you don't have to handle it directly.
Yeah.
You go to your account manager at the agency and they resolve it. It removes the personal friction. And then there's security.
Which is a huge concern for anyone outsourcing. You're handing over sensitive data, customer lists, pricing information.
They seem to take that very seriously. The sources mention they use a secure platform called Bittrex24 for data storage. All their VAs sign strict NDAs, and they are fully compliant with a law called POPIA.
POPIA. What's that?
It stands for the Protection of Personal Information Act. It's South Africa's data privacy law, and it was modeled very closely on Europe's GDPR. So for any business in the UK or EU, this is a critical point. It means their data handling standards are already aligned with what you're legally required to do.
That's a big deal. Now, you mentioned attrition earlier, the turnover problem. The sources claim VA Connect has a 98% retention rate over a 14-month period. In the outsourcing world, that number sounds, frankly, it sounds impossible. How are they doing that?
They've built this entire ecosystem around their employees. It's clearly not just about the paycheck. They have, for instance, something called VA Varsity, and that's VA Varsity.
Yeah, university.
Exactly. It's their own internal online training platform, like a corporate Udemy. They use it to constantly upskill their staff on new software, new regulations, new soft skills. So the VAs feel like they are continuously growing and developing their careers. They're not just stuck doing the same task day in and day out.
So they're investing in their people.
Heavily. And then there's a program called Atomic Energy, which, despite the name, isn't about nuclear physics.
Laughs. I was wondering.
It's a comprehensive wellness initiative. They provide access to dietitians, exercise coaches, mental mobility coaches. They actively work to prevent burnout, recognizing that remote work can be really draining and isolating if it's not managed properly.
That's smart. A burnt-out VA is going to make costly mistakes.
A healthy VA prevents stockouts. And the final piece of their retention puzzle is a program they call VPness.
VPness.
It's about two-way happiness. It's a formal process to ensure there's a strong cultural fit between the client and the VA. They check in to make sure the client is happy, obviously, but they also check in to make sure the VA is happy and feels respected by the client.
Because if the VA dreads logging in to work for a particular client every day, they're going to leave eventually, no matter how good the pay is.
100%. A good working relationship is a two-way street. And by managing that, they keep their people. And in a role like supply chain, that retention is gold. You need the person who remembers that supplier X always ships their invoices late, or that SEC Y needs special handling in the warehouse. That knowledge is invaluable.
Okay, so let's get tactical. We've talked about the why. Let's talk about the what. Section 5. Tactical implementation. What do these VAs actually do on a day-to-day basis? We're clearly not talking about booking flights and managing calendars here.
No, not for these specialized roles. In the supply chain context, it's very specific, high-value operational work. Let's start with demand forecasting.
Okay, break that down for me. What does a VA do for forecasting?
So they're not inventing the numbers. They're the engine room. They're the ones collecting and, crucially, cleaning the sales data from all your different channels, your Shopify store, your Amazon account, your wholesale orders. They run the baseline forecasts using your existing tools. But the most valuable part is they flag the anomalies.
They're the ones who spot the TikTok trend.
They're the ones asking the question, hey, why did sales of Skyu X458 suddenly spike by 40% last week? They do the initial detective work. Was it a marketing promo? Was it a single bulk order from a new customer? They annotate the data, so when the director looks at the report, the story's already there.
So the director's time is spent on the decision, not the digging.
Precisely. Then you have inventory management. This is the nitty-gritty. Calculating reorder points based on actual supplier lead times, not just guesswork. Constantly monitoring stock levels across multiple warehouses, identifying slow-moving or obsolete stock that's tying up cash.
And supplier relations.
Yeah.
This goes back to that communication and nuance piece.
Absolutely. They are drafting professional emails about price changes or production delays. They are the ones chasing suppliers for overdue orders. They are scheduling the quarterly business reviews. They can even maintain supplier scorecards, objectively tracking who's delivering on time and who isn't.
And the final piece is reporting.
Right. Taking all of this data and turning it into something a human can actually use to make a decision. Creating those weekly inventory position dashboards. Building reports that analyze stockout reasons. Translating all the operational metrics into the language of business. Cash flow and profit.
So instead of the director spending all of Tuesday morning wrestling with pivot tables to build the report for the Tuesday afternoon meeting,
the report is just sitting in their inbox, waiting for them at 9 a.m. There was a great quote in the research from a manager at an industrial supplier in Manchester. He said, "Before VA Connect, I spent my entire Tuesday morning just updating spreadsheets. Now my VA handles all of that overnight. I finally have time to actually manage the supply chain instead of just administrating it."
manage versus administrate. That is a really powerful distinction. Now, the service isn't just for supply chain, right? You mentioned other pillars.
Correct. They've structured their services around a few key areas. You have the general VA, which is that foundational admin support. Then a marketing VA, who handles things like campaign execution, scheduling social media, or managing email lists. A sales VA, who can do prospect research, pipeline management, and keep the CRM data clean.
And you said they have a nickname for the executive VAs?
Yes, the high-level executive VAs who support C-suite leaders. They call them the Carols. It's top-tier coordination, complex travel, board meeting prep, basically being the executive's right hand.
And it goes even more specialized than that.
It does. They also offer roles like software developers and dedicated project managers, so it really is a full-spectrum business support agency.
Okay, the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the money, the economics, the ROI. Because at the end of the day, someone, probably the CFO, has to look at the invoice and say yes.
Right, and the sources provide a really clear, compelling financial case study. It's for a hypothetical but very realistic mid-size UK retailer. Let's say they're doing about £15 million in annual revenue.
Okay, walk me through the before picture.
Before VA Connect, their operations director is personally spending at least 15 hours every single week on these manual inventory tasks, just grinding through spreadsheets. And as a result of being so bogged down, their stockout rate is hovering around 7%.
7%. That's 7% of their potential sales just disappearing.
Gone forever. So their first thought is, we need to hire someone, a junior inventory coordinator based in the UK. The cost for that role, when you factor in salary, national insurance, pension, it comes out to roughly £46,000 a year.
Okay. A significant investment. What's the VA Connect alternative?
They opt for a half-day package, 20 hours a week of dedicated support.
Yeah.
That covers all of that admin time the director was wasting. The annual cost for that service is around £16,800.
So right off the bat, just on salary versus service fee, that's a saving of almost £30,000.
Yes, that's the immediate, easy-to-see saving. But, and this is the part that really matters, the real value isn't in the wage arbitrage. It's in the operational improvements that support enables.
Tell me more.
With that extra dedicated focus on inventory, they're able to cut their stockout rate in half, from 7% down to 3.5%. For a £15 million business, that 3.5-point improvement translates into £525,000 in recovered revenue.
Wow.
Then, because they're managing their stock better, they reduce their excess inventory, which frees up another £150,000 in working capital. And they're not having to pay for last-minute emergency air freight anymore to cover stockouts, which saves another $24,000.
You add all that up.
The total annual benefit is potentially over £739,000.
From an initial investment of about $17,000.
That's a return on investment of over 4,000%.
When you lay out the math like that,
Yeah.
it's not even a question. It shifts from being a cost to being one of the highest returning investments you could make.
It completely reframes the conversation. You're not just hiring an assistant, you're buying revenue protection and freeing up capital.
And what do the actual pricing plans look like? Are you locked into a long-term contract?
No, which is another key point. It's very flexible, month-to-month contracts with just 30 days notice. So the risk is very low. They have a few main dedicated packages. A starter package of 10 hours per week runs somewhere between $1,000 and $1,200 US per month.
So that's really accessible, even for a very small business or solopreneur.
Definitely. The half-day package, which is 20 hours a week, is in the range of $1,700 to $2,000 a month. And a full-time, full-day VA at 40 hours a week is roughly $2,800 to $3,200 a month.
And what about for larger companies that need to scale up a whole team?
They have what they call growth accelerator packages. They have these very dramatic names like the Forge, the Summit, and the Apex. These are for bulk hours ranging from 160 hours a month up to over 400. The pricing there goes from about $4,300 up to $8,800 a month.
And I should just mention again for our listener, if you're looking at their site and see pricing with an R in front of it, like R12,000, that's the South African rand, you should pronounce it as 12,000 rand. But it's telling that most of the source material quotes in US dollars and British pounds.
It shows who their target market is. They are built to serve international clients.
Okay, the theory is solid, the math works. But now the hardest part, how do you actually make it work in practice? I think everyone listening has tried to delegate something important only to have it come back wrong, and you end up just sighing and saying, fine, I'll just do it myself.
That is the #1 failure point, the I'll just do it myself trap. It's a killer. And that brings us to our final section, the implementation strategy. The sources recommend a very deliberate, phased approach. They call it strategy first.
What does that mean in practice?
It means for the first 2 weeks, you document before you delegate. Your gut instinct is going to be to immediately offload the tasks you hate the most. You have to resist that urge.
So you need to map out your own processes first.
You have to. You spend those first 2 weeks creating a simple working map of your current workflow. How do you forecast inventory right now? Where does the data come from? Where are the decision points? If you can't explain your own process, you can't possibly teach it to someone else.
That makes sense. So 2 weeks of getting your own house in order. What happens in weeks 3 and 4?
That's when you start with low-stakes execution. You give the VA tasks that have a clear, binary right or wrong answer, compiling data from 3 different reports into one summary spreadsheet, updating tracking numbers, flagging any SKUs where the current stock won't cover the next 2 weeks of sales.
Things you can easily double-check to build trust and confidence.
Exactly. You let them get familiar with your products, your suppliers, your data. Then, in months 2 and 3, you graduate to judgment-like communication.
An example of that would be
Sending out standard purchase order confirmations, following up with the supplier on an overdue shipment using a pre-approved email template. You're still making all the strategic calls, which supplier to use, how much to order, but they are handling the day-to-day operational communication.
And from there, you eventually get to gradual autonomy.
That's the goal. By month 4 and beyond, they should be able to run the standard forecast updates on their own. They should be drafting the purchase orders and just sending them to you for a final one-click approval. They should be coming to you and saying, I've noticed a potential stockout issue for product Z in 3 weeks. Here are 2 possible solutions.
These start bringing you solutions, not just problems.
That's when you know it's working. And the communication cadence is vital too. This isn't someone you just email tasks to once a week. You need daily, quick, async updates on Slack or email, a 30-minute video sync once a week to review priorities, a broader review once a month. You have to treat them as a core member of your team.
It really is a complete shift in mindset, isn't it? It's about moving away from that lone hero mentality.
That is the absolute heart of it.
All right, let's bring this all together. Let's wrap up with our final thoughts. We've covered a ton of ground here.
We have. And I think to summarize the why, it boils down to the South African advantage. You're getting this unique combination of deep cultural alignment, a perfect time zone for UK and US businesses, and significant cost effectiveness. But, and this is the key, without the drop in quality and nuance you often see in the traditional data entry focused hubs.
And the why VA Connect specifically. It's the safety net. It's
Yep.
the stability and security of that managed agency model versus playing roulette in the freelancer Wild West. You're
Yeah.
getting vetting, backup coverage, training, and a whole support system.
Yeah. And I think for you, the listener, the big strategic takeaway is that the goal of all of this is not to make yourself redundant.
Right. I think that's a real fear people have. If I delegate all this important work, what's left for me to do?
What's left is the job you were actually hired for. You finally get to stop firefighting. You stop being a professional data wrangler. You get to start doing actual strategic analysis. You can finally spend time negotiating better terms with suppliers because you're not rushing to the meeting unprepared.
You get to sleep at night because your entire supply chain isn't being held together by your own personal 2 a.m. heroics anymore.
Exactly. The machine is running.
So with that, here's our final provocative thought for you to chew on as we close out.
Ask yourself this question and be honest. Are you avoiding delegating or outsourcing this kind of work because you genuinely believe your problems are so unique and too complex for anyone else to possibly understand?
Or are you maybe just a little bit addicted to being the hero, the one who has to swoop in and fix the mess every single day?
Oof, that's a tough one.
It is, because the sources are pretty clear. Your competition, the ones whose stockout rates are falling and whose profits are rising, they've already made their choice. They are busy building a resilient operational machine. They've moved past relying on individual heroics.
They've got a team.
They've got a team. Well, that is certainly a lot to think about. Thank you so much for walking us through all of this.
My pleasure. It was a fascinating deep dive.
And to our listener, hopefully you can finally close that spreadsheet and get some well-deserved rest. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.